This week on Heavy Metal Philosophy, I want to introduce you to Lindsay. She's a journalist for This Day in Metal. She's got an awesome YouTube channel that I think you should check out where she does historical analysis of bands' albums that have to do with history and mythology. She's been involved in the metal community for a long time, and I think you'll enjoy her content, which is why I want to share it with you. And as always, we have the riff of the week. This week, I'm going to let Lindsay pick the riff of the week. I hope you enjoy. Without further ado, here's my interview with Lindsay. All right, Lindsay, welcome to Heavy Metal Philosophy.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. And you have the YouTube channel, The Heavy Metal Journal, and you are a journalist for This Day in Metal. And I've been watching your work for a long time, but you just started this new show on your channel called Metal History, and that's what really rung alarm bells in my head. I was like, oh, that's kind of similar to what I'm doing. You know, I'm doing the philosophy side, and you're doing more of the history side. Have you always been a history buff?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't go as far to say that I'm a buff because there's loads that I don't know.
Right.
But I was actually into history before I got into metal, so I've been big on history since I was about 8, 9 years old. And it just made sense to me to try and mash my two big loves together somehow, kind of shoehorn them into each other. And I started realizing that there's a lot of metal out there that's based on history, mythology, and things like that. So I was like, hey, why don't I do a series talking about all the stories behind different metal tracks and albums and things like that? It's a work in progress, as all these things are, but it's something that I'm really passionate about, and I usually spend hours researching. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, same here. When I started this show, I was like, okay, heavy metal philosophy, why don't I mash them together? And I
Yeah.
still haven't quite got that balance the way I want it, but
hmm
you know, the show will evolve over time. I'm sure yours will as well.
Yeah. I
And you
mean,
start,
the thing is about these things is you could go into so much detail, and
right.
then the video could be hours upon hours long, and nobody's going to sit for like an hour and a half listening to you waffle on about something. So it's trying to keep it condensed but relevant, but also details enough to keep the audience interested. That's the tricky part.
Yeah. Well, your first series is with the 1914 record from, was it last year or the year before?
2021.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously with the name of the band 1914, it's about World War One. I was really impressed. I mean, when did you start this channel?
November last year, I think it was. Yeah, November last year.
So not even a year yet. I mean, you're starting with cold opens, you've got transitions, the text coming across the screen, B-roll that scrolls out and zooms, and it's just like, this is really good. Like, have you done video production before?
No, no, I haven't. Um, so the program that I use is Movavi, and the reason I downloaded that is because of an interview that I did for This Day in Metal, and it was because I didn't use any like video software for this interview, and I got really, really annoyed at how unprofessional it looked. So I kind of hyper fixated on it. I was like, right, I need to find out what software I can use. I downloaded it, paid for the yearly subscription, and played around with it until I was quite happy with the way it worked and stuff. So no, I've not done any video editing before. That was my very first time.
Okay, but it wasn't on your channel your first time. You've sort of, with your work for This Day in Metal, you've sort of been picking it up.
A little bit, yeah. It was mainly just kind of like trimming things here and there and mashing them together and stuff like that. And I had like an intro and an outro for the interviews, but that was it. I didn't do any transitions. I didn't do any text or bringing pictures in or anything like that. I didn't start doing that until my YouTube channel.
Well, you're off to a running start. I'll joke a lot about how terrible the first episode of Heavy Metal Philosophy is compared to what I'm doing now. But actually, this morning, I watched one from, it showed up in my feed, and I was like, let me see where I was at. And this was like, I don't know, late last year. So not that long ago. And I watched it. I was like,
Yeah.
damn, I was asked just a few minutes ago. so to see where you're starting at is super impressive.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it. It takes a long time. Like I spent hours editing as well as researching. So it can be quite draining sometimes, especially when you're trying to trim like a tiny little fragment of sound.
Right.
Um, I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
Yeah, I think you do a really good job of when you're talking about the history, then there's a photo that pans and zooms of the subject that you're talking about. Like the first episode about Principe, the assassin that started World War One. There's
Yeah.
actually a picture of him. So you're not just talking about it, you're also showing, which is just, you know, top of the line video production.
Thank you, thank you. I'm a very visual person, so the way I approached it was right. What would hook me into a video? What would make me want to sit and watch something? Because I often find that I can't watch people just sit on screen and talk. I need to have like other visual elements in the video for me to keep my interest going. So I was like, right, okay, I'll try this. It was difficult doing that the first time. I had the picture going all over the place. I just couldn't get a handle on it at all. I was like, what is going on? But thank you, it's appreciated.
Yeah, and after you've done a few of them, you'll just have that down, just bam, 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 done. It won't take you nearly as long.
Yeah, and that side of things is a lot easier to do. Like I call it making the video sparkly. So when you add the pictures and the text and the transitions and stuff, that part's quite easy now and it's quite quick. It's the editing everything else together, like taking out my verbal mistakes, or like when I stumble over my words and stuff when I'm recording, editing all that down so what I'm saying makes sense. That's the time consuming part.
Yeah. And deciding what to edit, I can get verbose sometimes. So I have to tell myself, this is too much. Take this out.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, absolutely. I'm exactly the same when it comes to the research because the history is so vast and so intricate. I often find myself getting stuck in a rabbit hole, and my brain will end up riffing on itself, and I'll just go into so much detail. I'm like, no, you need to scale it back a little bit because I try to keep it relevant to the metal track. So there'll be like certain details in the lyrics of the metal track that I base the history that are based on history, sorry. And I try to focus on that side of things rather than absolutely every detail. That's why I say in my videos, this is just like a broad, generalization of the history based on the track. But I always include the source material that I use in the description box. So anyone that is interested can go and read it in further detail for themselves.
What made you pick 1914 to start the series off with?
So I have a Twitter page specifically for the YouTube channel, and I put up a post saying that I've got a list compiled already, but is there anything else that anybody else wants to see? And quite a large number of people had commented about 1914, and because that seemed quite popular, I was like, okay, I'll go with this one first. This is what these guys want to see in here. That's what I'm going to do.
That to me says that you must have like other albums already in mind that you want to do after 1914.
Yeah, I've got quite a large list. It's not just history based. A lot of it is history, but there's a lot of mythology albums that I'm going to be looking into as well. I don't have the list in any particular order or anything like that, but I do have quite a long list because when I started researching how many albums were based on history or mythology, the list kept growing, and I knew there was a lot, but I didn't quite realize the extent of it. So I was like, awesome, I've got a lot of source material to work with here.
So you'll have to subscribe if you want to see what she does next. I also highly recommend subscribing just for the 1914 stuff because you're only, what, 3 songs into it now?
Yeah, and my fourth one should be going up either tomorrow, well, preferably tomorrow, but I'm going to a gig tomorrow night. So the fourth one will be up either tomorrow or Friday at the very latest.
Okay. And this should air on Tuesday. And so the fourth one should already be out by the time that this airs.
Yeah, definitely, 100%.
And so you do your Metal Mondays, which is, going over the releases from the previous weekend, and you've got your metal history. Do you have other plans for things that you want to do?
Yeah, so I'm going to be doing ranking videos. Like, for example, I'll take bands like Metallica and Fear Factory and I'll rank their albums just based on my own personal preference. I'm planning on doing gig vlogs, so I'm hoping to vlog the gig that I'm going to tomorrow night. And just randomly, because why not? I'm actually going to be doing a lot of hiking vlogs. I live in Scotland. It's a very scenic country. It's not necessarily history or well, it is history based. Sorry, it's not necessarily metal based. These kind of vlogs, But it's just to change things up a little bit. I like going out and about and stuff, and I want to show off the landscape and talk about the history of the country.
Well, I'll definitely be interested to see that. And then I'll be definitely wanting to pick your brain about it afterwards, because I found that the algorithm just absolutely punishes you when you go outside of your niche. And,
Yeah.
there's got to be a way to do it, because I would love to do it. And I've seen people do it, but I just hadn't figured it out yet.
Yeah, it's gonna be a trial, I think. Whether set up a different channel specifically for that, I don't know. But I am planning on going out on a hike soon, and I'll just kind of use it as a guinea pig and see what happens.
And who are you going to see for your gig vlog?
Tomorrow night I am seeing Apocalyptica and Epica playing Glasgow.
Nice. And that is a synergistic pairing there.
Yeah, definitely. I've never seen any of these bands live before, so I'm really excited about that.
There's been a lot of great like pairings lately with these tours. I think it's probably because of the pandemic. Like everybody was held back, and then it's like, okay, it's open, everybody go. So, whereas people's schedules wouldn't have lined up before, now everybody gets to start at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a lot of these great pairings are due to a lot of the cost of touring as well, because, everybody hiked up their prices. Everything is much more expensive now. I have heard and seen a lot of bands talk about how they can't afford to go to certain places because the prices of touring are so high. So I think a lot of these bands are kind of like coming together on epic tours, which is only great for fans, right?
Right.
Just to kind of alleviate the cost for them as well.
Yeah, I'd never heard any bands complain before about merch cuts. And back in my day, I never had a venue merch cut us. So,
No.
but this year's like everybody's complaining about venues doing merch cuts. And I'm like, whose idea was that? And how did we let this happen?
I know, exactly. It's absolutely insane, but what can we do about it?
We can't do anything about it. But all right. So tell me, how did you get into metal?
That's kind of a three-part story, so I'll try and make it quick.
Excellent.
So it was, first of all, it was more the aesthetic, like the look of what metalheads wear and stuff that got me into it. And it was from the wrestling, WWF, back in the 90s. And I remember on a Saturday afternoon, I was watching it with my dad. I was about 8, 9 years old, maybe a little bit older than that. And The Undertaker came out. And, it's all atmospheric. He's got this big trench coat on and the hat, and he's really spooky, and the bells are going, and then his entrance music starts. And I was just like, I don't know who this guy is, but I want to be him when I grow up. So I fell in love with that. That was absolutely awesome. Shortly after that, maybe I was about 11, 12 years old, roughly, I was watching a music TV channel. And one after the other, I can't remember the exact order, but one after the other, Motorhead, Ace of Spades, Iron Maiden, Aces High, and Metallica's One played one after the other. And I just remember sitting there going, oh my God, what is this I'm hearing? This is amazing. I am basing my life on this now. This is my entire personality. And then it just kind of rolled on from there. I credit a good friend of mine from high school, Laura, hello. Look, my friend Laura got me into a lot of metal, so she was kind of like a gateway for Slipknot, Rammstein, Korn, System of a Down, bands like that. And then it just kind of spiraled out of control from there.
It's kind of a similar story to my origin story. I heard Metallica for the first time on MTV. Prior to that, I liked, harder rock and roll, but like AC/DC. I didn't know that it could get heavier than that. And then I saw the video for One, and it's just like being struck by lightning. I just knew that my life would never be the same again.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. And like I said, it became an obsession, and it still is now. You can never have too much music, and it's amazing that we're all still discovering brand new things now. But yeah, it just kind of spiraled out of control from there.
I ask people this all the time because everybody's got a different opinion. In philosophy, there's that age-old debate about, do we have free will, or is everything determined? Which do you think it is? Do you think we have, and I'm gonna tie this into metal, but do you think we have free will, or do you think everything's determined?
Oh, that's a very good question. It's a very difficult question to answer because I don't necessarily believe in destiny as such. I don't think things are mapped out for us specifically. I think we are all products of the decisions that we make and the consequences of that. So I would say that's pretty much tied into free will. So yeah, I would believe that, free will, definitely.
All right, so this is how I tie that into metal. So I was always a free will guy. Like I never would have thought it's determined because I make my own decisions. I'm a free man. When I go to the grocery store, I pick my cereal. Like my pride wouldn't let me think otherwise. But then
Mhm.
when I look backwards at my metal origin story and I think about it, I never made the decision I'm going to be a metalhead. This is what I'm going to do. Like I literally had no choice in the matter. As soon as I saw that on that one video, it was instantaneous, and
Yeah.
there was no chance that I was going to be able to say no. I'm going to not like this despite the way I'm feeling. And
Okay, yeah, you've got a fair point there, actually. Yeah.
so I agree with you. I don't think that we have a destiny, but I do think that we have confines. There's walls on this thing that's basically my personality based upon my genes that I inherited from my parents and the environment that I grew up upon. Like I can't decide to be a country music fan.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. Yeah, you can't really force yourself to listen to things that you don't like and stuff, I suppose. So yeah, okay, I agree. Yeah, you've got a fair
But
point there.
if somebody was going to say, well, you're going to be a loser when you grow up, I would be like, no, I'm going to decide not to. I'm going to do these things, and make sure that that doesn't happen. So I am not proclaiming that I've solved the age old debate that all these greater philosophers than me have debated for eons, but that's just my opinion on it.
No, it's a solid point that you've made there, actually. Yeah, I've never really thought about it that way before, so it's definitely something worth thinking about.
So you became a metalhead after, the Undertaker, who was also my favorite, by the way,
Yeah.
and, hearing Metallica, Iron Maiden. And so it must have been a central theme in your life. And that's at some point between there and then now you working for This Day in Metal.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey, but metal has always been like a staple thing in my life, regardless of where I am, what I'm doing, where I go, who I'm with. It's always been metal.
And do you have like a group of friends around that you could share that with? Or are you like me, kind of isolated out here in the woods and, I got to get on the internet?
Um, a bit of both, really. I wouldn't say I'm isolated. There's a select few people in my life that are into metal, but in my inner circle, I've got some friends that like some aspects of it. Others are more into their hard rock. I've even got friends that listen to like pop and hip hop and rap and stuff like that. So I wouldn't necessarily say I was isolated with regards to my taste in music, but at the same time, I'm not completely surrounded by people like a lot of people in my life that are into it either. A lot of my interaction when it comes to metal, apart from those select few, like I think there's maybe three people in my life that are into it as much as I am, if not a little bit more. A lot of my interaction in the metal world and the metal scene is definitely online.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Growing up, I was like the only one, I lived in a small town. And then when I found somebody like metal, I was like, oh, friend, friend,
Yeah, exactly. Be my friend.
and then sometimes I would wind up regretting it. I was like, oh, I shouldn't have. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I live in quite a small village in Scotland. The closest city to me is maybe 40-minute drive away. And even then, unless they're hiding, the metal scene isn't that big. I kind of have to go further afield for that here. I mean, don't get me wrong, we're dotted here, there, and everywhere, but in my kind of area, my closest town, in my little village, and things like that, the metal scene isn't that big. Pretty non-existent, actually.
Yeah. It's non existent where I'm at too. I drive to Atlanta, which is the closest major city when I go to see
Yeah,
shows.
yeah. So I feel your pain.
It's all right though. It's kind of good. There's this brewery that just opened in Atlanta called Sabbath Brewing. And it's like a metal themed beer brewery, and they have shows there almost every night. And it's
Really?
probably a good thing that that's not nearby for me.
Yeah, probably. I mean, there's a few pubs in the nearest town that do metal on occasion. I think there's one bar in particular that maybe puts on metal shows in my local town, but they're very few and far between. A lot of it is kind of like the emo pop rock, kind of hard rock kind of thing. Occasionally metal, but not that often.
No place is perfect.
I know, exactly. So thank God for the internet.
Yes. And shows like yours.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's appreciated.
So, what are you looking forward to this year, metal wise?
Oh, there's a lot of really good albums that are due to come out. A lot of gigs, festivals that I'm interested in. I might be going to a festival. It's not 100% confirmed yet, but that might be on the cards. But yeah, there's quite a lot of big albums coming out this year that I'm really looking forward to. And I'm also looking forward to discovering new stuff, as always.
You work for This Day in Metal. I work for Metal Digest. And then, of course, we're doing our own individual shows. And by making it that our job, we, not that it's a chore or anything, but we've sort of have to listen to all the newest stuff. And that's been a tremendous blessing for me. I could have easily been that dude just like, oh, I'm still listening to Metallica and Opeth records from 20 years ago.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. Big shout out to K-Man Riffs. That's who I rely upon on Twitter to get
Absolutely.
me releases. And it's absolutely amazing because, on a weekly basis now, you're getting 40, 50, even more than that, new albums dropping on a weekly basis. There's so much to choose from. And I would be exactly the same as you if that wasn't the case. I would still be listening to, I mean, I still listen to Ride the Lightning pretty much on a daily basis anyway. But I would still be just like in that area rather than expanding.
So, speaking of how many albums there are, like, do you have a process when you're going through them? Like, for instance, me, if it says power metal in the listing, like I use K-Man as well, and also Metal Archives and Metal
Yeah.
Injection and Bandcamp. It gets to be a much, but if it's like listed as power metal or it's like a EP or a split, I kind of move unless it's a band I've really been looking forward to. I kind of just put that to the side because I know I don't have time to listen to every single that dropped this weekend.
Yeah, my process is pretty similar to that actually. If it says power metal, although I did have two power metal albums in my top 40 from last year, which I was very surprised about, and I don't hear the end of that either. But normally, normally, if it says power metal or stoner psychedelic metal or sometimes even sludge metal, I'll kind of deviate away from that kind of thing. But anything else, I'll screenshot what K-Man says. I'll create a little list on my phone and I'll just go through them and see what's what.
Well, I like that sludge, and I like some of that stoner psychedelic, but it gets really samey sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's just not my vibe. I can't get into. I've tried and I try and I try. I don't like just panning something off because I'm not going to like that genre. I will always give something a try, but the amount of times I've tried that genre and I just can't get into it, I can't do it. I'm sorry.
That that's me in power metal.
Yeah.
I have not. There's like one Sabaton song that I like, and even that, it's like I'm not putting it on all the time.
Yeah, and it's really weird because like when it comes to movies, TV shows, books, things like that, I really love that kind of genre, the fantasy kind of genre. But when it comes to metal, I can't get into it. I really can't.
Yeah, that's unfortunate because for your history series, like Sabaton would be perfect. Like that's all they do.
That's true. I am still going to be doing it though, just because I'm not. Well, I did like Sabaton's last album that they released last year. That was in my top 40. So I probably will cover that one and others. Just because I don't like it doesn't mean that I'm not going to cover it. I'm
Yeah.
not really doing. I mean, I say things in my videos like, "Oh, you need to check this album out if you haven't already," and things like that. But I don't really review the album on my YouTube channel unless it's my new Music Monday series. So in my history series, I kind of just base it on the history rather than do I like it or not.
So the reviews are more for like This Day in Metal.
Yeah, yeah. So I do weekly album reviews for This Day in Metal, and they usually get posted on a Friday or a Saturday. When it comes to my new Music Monday for my YouTube channel, I'll do a quick review. I'll just talk about why I like it and what tracks I like, and then kind of quickly move on. But my more in-depth reviews are for This Day in Metal.
So do you pick which ones you're going to review, or do you get assignments from your editor?
I pick now. They used to be given to me, but when I got more experience, I got the free rein to kind of pick what albums that I want to review now. We do have a team. It's not just me that writes the reviews. I do have a team as well. And what we tend to do is we have like a group chat set up, and we'll just put a message in saying, hey, does anyone mind if I review X, Y, and Z? Just to make sure that we're not stepping on any toes and there's no crossover and things like that. But yeah, I do get to choose what it is that I'm going to review.
Oh, that's a blessing. So, I get assignments, and sometimes it's like, ooh, I hate this. And then it's like, how am I going to write about this? Because I can't just be like, this is ass, the end, sign John Barbas.
Exactly. I mean, I'm not going to name the organization because I don't write for them anymore, but very, very briefly, I did write for another reviewing website, and I was handed the assignments, and I'm not going to name the bands either because it's not fair, but every single band album that I was given, I hated. I just didn't like it at all. So I was given the nickname Miss Meh because I thought everything was meh. It was just gut wrenching because you don't want to lie when you do your reviews, but at the same time, you don't want to dump all over the bands either and put people off,
Right. Yeah, I don't like writing negative reviews, but I have to, because you won't read my reviews if I just give everything glowing praises, right? So
yeah. I mean, I think there's maybe two reviews that I have been honest and given it a bit of a meh review. And one of them I still come under fire for occasionally, and that was Trivium's last album, Court of the Dragon, I think it was called. I am a huge Trivium fan. I grew up listening to Trivium in my teenage years. I had the Ascendancy album poster on my wall for years, and that is still my favorite album of theirs to this day. And I've seen them live countless times. I just couldn't get on board with their latest album. And I think I was one of the very few outlets that gave it a 5 out of 10, I think it was. And I came under fire for that a little bit.
So that's something interesting. Like, how do you pick your number? And I've not been able to get I've talked to many writers, and we all have different ways, So like, I've never given anything like a 4, for instance. And I mean, I've gotten assignments that I just hated. I mean, hated. Yeah. It's like I got this one band that sounded like they were trying to be Hollywood Undead, which is a band that I already don't like. And then this band is trying to be like that. And, so on gut instinct, I want to give it a 1 because I just hate it. But I gave it like a 6, I think, because like the guitar player, the tone was good. Like the drums weren't off time. Like it was mixed well. Like, it was executed in the studio professionally.
Yeah.
So I felt I couldn't give it a 1 or a 2 because it wasn't like they were hitting bad notes or something, there was a hiss in the background. I just hated the music. So I'm always curious, like, what do you think about when you pick your number?
Okay, so first of all, I kind of try to look at it objectively. What can I hear? Is it crisp enough? Is it too sludgy? Is there a bad note here? Is the production a bit grimy here and things like that? But overall, I kind of just base it on the dopamine hit that I get from it. Am I vibing to this? If I'm vibing to it, I'm like, okay, cool. And if it keeps me interested as well, if I don't have to force my way through to the end of the album, I know it'll be a high number.
Yeah, I call that the head test. If it makes my head move, regardless of genre of music, obviously metal makes me headbang, but maybe a different genre that's pretty, if it makes me turn my head in curiosity or makes me bob my head because the groove is there,
Yeah.
If it makes my head move, I'm going to like it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've got a similar test, but I don't call it the head test. I call it the kitchen test. I do a lot of cooking and I play a lot of music when I'm cooking. So if it gets me vibing in the kitchen, I know I'm onto something good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, Zoom is telling me that we're running out of time. I'd love to chop it up with you about metal but I also know it's very late there in Scotland. So I very much appreciate you
Yeah,
coming on. And
I think it's almost midnight here.
oof. So I will have all of your contact information in the description, so everybody jump on her YouTube, go check out This Day in Metal, Twitter, Instagram. Is there anything else that you want to shout out?
No, not really, other than thanks for having me on. It's appreciated. And if anyone wants to check out any of my stuff, whether it's YouTube or This Day in Metal or just my random posts that I put on Twitter, feel free to do so. I really appreciate the support. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. And now, like we close every episode of Heavy Metal Philosophy, it's time for the riff of the week. Would you like to pick this week's riff of the week?
Yeah, so this week's riff of the week for me is a track that I'm basing my next metal history video on, and that's 1914's "Don't Tread on Me," the Harlem Hellfighters.
Is that going to be episode 4?
That is going to be episode 4, yeah.
All right, so that one should already be released by the time this one releases. Y'all check that out. The Heavy Metal Journal, doing metal history right now on 1914. Lindsay, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's appreciated.
All right, and then I'll record an outro later.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, I kind of just waffled on a little bit.
That's podcasting.
Yeah, I'm just like, oh yeah, I'm talking about something fun.
I don't really plan these, I pick like 3 or 4 questions, that I really want to know. And then I want to leave room in case somebody brings something up. I'm like, oh yeah, let's talk about that. And we can go off in that direction. And
yeah,
most of the time that works out pretty good. But a couple of times I've interviewed people and then it's like, oh shit, I should have had more questions.
Oh no, yeah, it's awkward when that happens, isn't it? I've had an interview like that and it lasted about 5 minutes because I was like, I'm like you, I'm like, oh, let's just make this a conversation and then, we'll just take it on naturally from there. And the guy that I was interviewing was literally just giving me yes and no answers, and I'm like, can't
was
work
this a musician?
It was, yeah. It was
See, same. Like if I'm interviewing somebody like you, or I don't know, somebody like I interviewed a student, a PhD student in metal studies. I didn't even know that was a thing.
Cool.
Plenty of conversation. But when somebody's doing their press tour for their album that's coming out and their PR person sent them to me and they don't really, they don't know me. That's happened a couple of times. It's just like, oh no, one guy's like, I'm going to have to win this guy over. Yeah.
Totally. It gets awkward as well. I mean, there's been a couple of bands that I've spoken to where there's a language barrier there, and I get that. I understand that. That's something totally different. But when somebody's just giving you yes and no answers, and you can't work with that, and they're just staring at you, it's just like, this is awkward.
Yeah. It's awkward for us, but then also like, how am I going to make this into something that somebody wants to read or watch?
Yeah, exactly. So it's like a bad light on you, and it's not your fault.
Right. Yeah. Nobody's going to be like, I mean, this is never going to happen. Let's say I interviewed James and he did that to me, James Hetfield, yes and no. Nobody's going to be like, oh man, James sucks. They're going to say, no, John sucks. He couldn't.
It's like, it's not me.
Yeah. There you have it, metalheads. And before we play the riff of the week, I want to know, what did you think? Hit it in the comments. Let me know. Did you subscribe to Lindsay's channel? I really hope you did. And in the meantime, click right here. For the first time on YouTube, I'm going to link to somebody else's channel. That's a playlist to her stuff. And most importantly, read philosophy, listen to metal. I love you.